The stage was set, the atmosphere electric. Elon Musk was about to address the world in one of the most highly anticipated live events of the year. Cameras rolled, broadcasting the moment to millions around the globe. A backdrop of American flags framed the stage, amplifying the gravity of what was to come. Everyone in the audience, from tech leaders to curious onlookers, knew this would be a night to remember, but not for the reason they expected. Front and center, seated in the first row, were Grimes and their 4-year-old son, A-12. Their presence was unexpected, and murmurs rippled through the crowd. Grimes tried to keep A-12 settled in her lap, but the child's boundless energy was hard to contain. His eyes darted between the bright lights and the towering figure of his father on stage, his curiosity unmistakable. Elon stepped into the spotlight, greeted by thunderous applause. His calm demeanor and steady voice filled the room. "Thank you for joining us tonight," he began, his words carried far beyond the venue by live television. "Tonight, we'll explore an idea that could redefine our future, one that challenges what we believe is possible." The crowd hung on his every word, but A-12 had other plans. Fidgeting in Grimes's lap, he tugged at her sleeve and pointed insistently at the stage. Grimes whispered something to him, her expression a mix of amusement and caution. But A-12 wasn't interested in sitting still. As Elon continued, his voice unwavering, the camera momentarily cut to his son. Viewers at home saw the determined look on the child's face as he wriggled free from his mother's hold. The crowd chuckled softly, but the laughter quickly turned into a collective gasp as A-12 stood up and made his way toward the stage. Elon noticed the movement out of the corner of his eye and paused for a split second. The next thing you know, the world trembles after A-12 grabs Elon Musk's mic on live TV. Just watch his reaction. The room was silent except for the faint hum of the live broadcast feed. All eyes were now on the small figure who grabbed the mic from his father. A-12 was unshaken by the audience, the cameras, or the gravity of the moment. Grimes half stood from her seat, her hand hovering as if she wanted to call him back but knew it was too late. The audience shifted nervously, unsure if this was a planned moment or an unscripted interruption. As X grabbed the mic, the crowd murmured in surprise, a wave of scattered laughter rippling through the room. "Looks like we have a new speaker tonight," Elon quipped, stepping to the side. His voice carried an edge of humor, but there was also a flicker of unease in his expression as he glanced back at Grimes. A-12 now stood alone under the glaring lights, clutching the microphone tightly in both hands. The audience held their breath, waiting to see what this 4-year-old would say. For a moment, he just looked out into the sea of faces, his small frame dwarfed by the massive stage and towering screens. Then, with surprising clarity, he spoke, "Daddy says robots will take over the world." The words hung in the air like a bombshell. The crowd froze, unsure whether to laugh, gasp, or sit in stunned silence. A few awkward chuckles broke through, but most people just stared. Elon's expression was a mixture of shock and disbelief, his composure faltering for the first time that night. Grimes had both hands over her mouth, her wide eyes darting between her son and Elon. The room felt heavier now, the playful innocence of the moment overshadowed by the weight of what had just been said. A-12 stood there, holding the mic as if waiting for a response, his confidence unwavering, oblivious to the tidal wave of reactions his words had just unleashed. The room was utterly still. A-12's words had landed like a thunderclap, reverberating through the minds of everyone present. "Daddy says robots will take over the world." It wasn't just what he said, it was how he said it, calm, confident, with the kind of innocent clarity that only a child could bring to such an ominous statement. For a moment, even Elon seemed unsure of how to react. His usual quick wit and composure faltered as he stared at his son, the weight of the moment visibly catching him off guard. Grimes, still seated, looked frozen, her hands clutched together as if she was silently willing the moment to end. A ripple of uneasy laughter began to spread through the audience. Some exchanged nervous glances, unsure whether to take the child's words as a joke or as a bizarre insight into one of the world's most enigmatic minds. Others sat completely still, as if waiting for Elon to explain, to justify, or maybe even deny the unexpected proclamation. Elon finally stepped forward, his hands raised slightly as if to calm the crowd. "Well," he started, his voice carrying a nervous edge, "that's one way to phrase it." The audience chuckled, but the laughter was thin, tinged with tension. A-12, however, wasn't done. He adjusted his grip on the microphone, glancing at the crowd as if he were about to double down. "Daddy says I might make robots when I grow up," he declared. His words, though childlike, carried a weight that seemed to ripple outward, sparking new murmurs among the audience. This time, Elon reacted quickly, placing a hand gently on his son's shoulder. "That's some big ambition right there," he said, forcing a smile. But let's save the world-changing speeches for a few more years, okay? He carefully reached for the microphone, but A-12 hesitated, holding it tightly for a moment before finally letting go. Grimes, now standing at the edge of the stage, motioned for her son to come back to her. But A-12 turned to look up at Elon, his face a mix of pride and determination. "You said it," he murmured, just loud enough for the microphones to catch. Elon, visibly flustered, nodded slightly, guiding his son back toward his mother. The audience erupted into applause, not for the technology they had come to hear about, but for a moment that none of them would ever forget. Elon stood motionless for a moment, watching as A-12 handed over the mic and walked back toward Grimes. The applause swelled, but there was an unmistakable air of tension in the room. The crowd wasn't just clapping out of amusement, they were processing the child's words, trying to decipher if they were a simple misinterpretation or something far more revealing. As A-12 reached Grimes, she knelt down and embraced him, her face a mixture of relief and lingering disbelief. She whispered something to him, though her expression made it clear she was still reeling from what had just unfolded. The cameras caught her looking up at Elon, her gaze filled with an unspoken question, "What now?" Elon stepped forward again, taking his place behind the podium. But the confidence that usually defined him seemed shaken. He gripped the edges of the podium, his knuckles pale, and let out a faint laugh. "Well," he said, his voice slightly strained, "you never know what's going to happen at a live event." The audience laughed politely, though the room still felt heavy with uncertainty. Elon took a deep breath and continued, trying to steer the moment back on course. "What my son just shared, while a little ahead of his time, does speak to the kind of ambition we hope to inspire in future generations. Big ideas, bold visions, and maybe even a little mischief along the way." This drew a more genuine laugh from the crowd, but it was clear that the tension hadn't fully dissipated. Grimes, now seated again with A-12 in her lap, seemed to relax slightly as Elon regained his footing. The child, meanwhile, looked entirely unfazed, fidgeting with a small toy he had tucked into his pocket, as though the entire incident had already been forgotten. Elon's words began to flow more naturally as he shifted focus back to the purpose of the event. Still, his usual rhythm was punctuated by occasional glances toward his son and Grimes, as if part of him was bracing for another unexpected moment. But for the audience, and likely the millions watching live, the presentation had already taken a back seat. The moment wasn't about the innovation Elon had come to unveil, it was about the unfiltered, unscripted declaration of a 4-year-old and the ripple it sent through the room. As Elon continued, the lingering question hung in the air. Was it just a child's innocent remark, or a glimpse into a future that Elon Musk wasn't ready to reveal? As Elon continued his speech, trying to regain control of the room, A-12 leaned toward Grimes and whispered something. She shook her head slightly, clearly hoping her son would stay quiet for the rest of the event. But A-12 had other ideas. Without warning, he wriggled free from her arms again and stood at the edge of the stage. This time, the crowd fell silent before he even spoke, the tension in the air almost palpable. Grimes looked mortified, her hand hovering as if she might reach for him, but she hesitated, perhaps realizing the moment had already escaped her grasp. A-12, unbothered by the hundreds of eyes watching him, called out in his small but clear voice, "Daddy said I'll build really smart robots soon." The statement was simple, almost innocent, yet it reignited the ripple of shock that had swept through the room earlier. A few chuckles broke the silence, but most of the audience seemed too stunned to react. Elon froze mid-sentence, turning to face his son again. For a brief moment, his expression softened, his lips curving into the faintest smile. "You're not wrong," Elon said finally, his tone light but deliberate. "I guess we know who's taking over when I retire." The crowd erupted into a mix of laughter and applause, the tension breaking like a wave. Elon walked toward his son, scooping him up effortlessly and carrying him back to Grimes. "Now," he said, addressing the audience with a wink, "let's get back to tonight's big ideas before my 4-year-old decides to unveil them all." The crowd laughed again, but the sense of wonder lingered. The unscripted moment had cemented itself as the true highlight of the night. As the event came to a close, the air in the room felt different. While Elon managed to finish his presentation with his usual poise, it was clear that the night belonged to someone else. A-12's unexpected spotlight moment had left an indelible impression on everyone in attendance, and likely the millions watching live. Backstage, away from the cameras and the crowd, the Musk family gathered in a quiet corner. Elon sat down beside Grimes, who was holding A-12 on her lap. The boy, seemingly oblivious to the gravity of what had just happened, was happily playing with the toy he'd brought along. Grimes broke the silence first. Well, she said, her voice laced with a mixture of disbelief and amusement, that wasn't exactly how I pictured tonight going. Elon let out a small chuckle, leaning back in his chair. He's got good instincts, he replied, though the faint tension in his voice hinted that he was still processing the moment. Maybe a little too good, Grimes added, raising an eyebrow. You told him he might build robots someday? Elon shrugged. We've had a few talks. Didn't think he'd make his debut announcement on live TV, though. They both laughed quietly, their eyes falling on A-12, who seemed completely unbothered by the night's events. After a moment, Elon leaned forward, placing a hand on his son's shoulder. You know, he said softly, you might have stolen the show tonight, but next time, maybe give me a little heads up. A-12 looked up at his father and grinned, completely unaware of the waves his words had sent across the world. And with that, the Musk family shared a rare, quiet moment together, one that even they knew would become part of a story told for years to come. What do you think? Was A-12's statement just innocent, childlike curiosity, or did he unknowingly hint at something Elon Musk hasn't told the world yet?